Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to have lesson 4 of the foundations of photography, and we're going to talk about depth of field. But first, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Uh, Ours was nice. So, anyway, I did want to point out that in the last episode, we had talked about depth of field, but I made one mistake in the examples. So, depth of field is impacted by your distance from your subject. Um, and in this case, I was too far from the sofa when I was taking those pictures. So as you get further away from your subject, your depth of field gets larger. Um, where it really comes into play, and depth of field is really when it comes to portraits, typically very important because you want your subject, your portrait, to be your only thing really observable in your picture. So you want that blurry background. That's why, like, the iPhone has portrait mode, and when you take a picture of a person or an animal, what's in focus appears to be just that person or animal, and it blurs out the background. So we're going to switch over, and so this is a plant in my backyard. Now you can still sort of tell. I took this using the exact same camera, the Fuji X-H1, using the exact same lens, the f1.7 Yashica 50mm lens. Now, I should point out that the Fuji X-H1 is an APS-C camera. So you get deeper depth of field on smaller sensor cameras, typically. Larger image sensor cameras tend to extend the depth of field or the range in which everything's in focus. So using a crop sensor camera for portraits can very easily yield you nicer portrait results. Now, that's a 35mm camera is still, and this is why people pay for really fast, expensive glass. You can still get that blur, but the better the glass you have, the nicer the blur area is. So in this case, and this is not really a good example of that, where they start talking about bokeh. But bokeh generally refers to light coming through areas in the background of your picture and what shapes they take. Now, this background is heavily blurred. This was taken at f1.7. I was approximately 3 feet from this subject. Now, you'll see that as I went and changed the aperture from f1.7 to f5.6, more of the image, the background of the image, is going to be in focus. So let us move. Wait for my hard drive to catch up here. Wow, that took a while. Anyway, this is f5.6, and while the background is still blurry, you can distinctly see more details. So let's try and go back here. There's at f1.7. There's at 5.6. So as you can tell between those pictures, we now see more details in our background. It's still blurry at 5.6, and my image is still sharp of my subject. So if I need to stop down the lens, I can, and still get a blurry background and isolate my subject. Now, once I move to f11, oops, you'll see now that there are sections of the background that are, while it's not in focus, you can distinctly tell exactly that this is a fence, it's a plank fence, it has a cap board, you know, those kinds of things. This is a much better demonstration of depth of field. Now, having said this, your wide apertures, and it's referred to as a wide aperture because it's related to how wide your opening is in the lens. So when they say wide open, that literally means the lens is fully open. The blades that control the aperture are pushed fully back. You generally, if the lens is fully open, you won't even see those blades. As you stop the lens down, you'll start seeing those aperture blades start to close in and make that the circle smaller, allowing less light to come in. And that creates a deeper depth of field. And that's why landscapes typically are shot at f8 through f11, f12, sometimes even f16, although most lenses aren't at their sharpest at f16. Most of them are generally very sharp between f8 and f11 in landscape or infinity focus. When you're shooting portraits, most people like to shoot wide open, and you'll hear them discuss that. What lenses perform best when they're wide open? Because your depth of field makes the background disappear. You know, going back to our example, this is shot wide open, f1.7 in this case. Most of the best lenses for portraiture where you can shoot wide open are the f 0.95 through usually f2. Some lenses are way better than others at this. Some of it also depends on how many aperture blades are in the lens. When it comes to the quote-unquote bokeh balls. So the more lenses, the more blades in the lens tend to create more round bokeh balls. You know, a lot of lenses only have 6 aperture blades. Better lenses tend to have more aperture blades. A lot of my lenses have between 7 and I think I've got one that's got 12 aperture blades. You know, a lot of them have like 8, 9 aperture blades, and those produce generally round bokeh balls, but they might produce a more oval looking bokeh ball. There are a handful of lenses that have significantly more blades, and the more blades, the rounder those bokeh balls tend to be. Now, the glass that's in the lens will also impact the shape of those bokeh balls. but now we're getting outside the topic of depth of field. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope that makes the depth of field more understandable. You know, here I have a shallow depth of field. I'm shooting at f1.7 and I'm 3 feet from the subject. This would be an ideal portrait range. Let's go back to our f5.6. Here, still perfectly good, but there is more detail being shown in the background at this point. And then when I'm shooting, fully stop down, and I'm at f11, what we wind up with is a lot more of the background in focus, as you see here. You know, so that's it. That's it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I would appreciate it. Thanks and have a great week.